Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another Honkai Impact character analysis. We're back with the main character, or the major character for 6.6. The next one coming out, which is Hare, which is going to be a big one. There's another character also coming out in this patch, which is Prometheus, but that will be coming out after this video. But yeah, we're going to be looking at Hare today. We're going to be looking at all of her kit, everything to do with the character, going through the motions of understanding what she does, what role does she fill, and then also some build things, main weapon, best actual stigma, maybe some substitutes, and then also some supports that you may want to run with her because she is a main DPS. And then lastly, just some final thoughts about the character and kind of just, a general opinion thing. But for now, let's get into the character and what they do. So we can see that she's a Mech Physical character. You can already make a lot of assumptions there. Mech Physical, there's only one other character I believe that is like that, and that is Bright Knight Excelsior. And so you can maybe assume that Hare might replace Bright Knight Excelsior, but probably not too crazily, at least. Maybe to a certain degree, but not too crazily. Anyway, the lead skill is team crit damage increases by 22, 24, 26. These intervals are dependent on which S rarity you have the character at, but we're just going to look at the first number, which is 22% crit damage increase just for the team skill. And then for each physical damage character in the team, Hare's summoned units gain physical damage plus 8, 9, or 10%, again, depending on the S rarity, which is also very good. It's that crit damage bonus that you can see there, and you'll also see a lot of crit damage throughout this whole character's kit, which is going to be very indicative of maybe how you're going to build the character, but overall a great lead skill, crit damage, and physical damage boosting. Now, going on to the rest of the kit, it's going to be mostly kind of like picking apart certain things. Not going to read a lot of it because it is quite word heavy, specifically the passives window here, as we can see. A lot of words here. There's a lot of words to really read here, but I've highlighted a lot of the important things, and each page has a summary on it. In the bottom right here, we can see that summary. Each page has one, and if you want to just speed through this, I've kind of picked apart the mostly important things that you maybe need to understand. But let's go through the highlighted stuff. So take a look at the first highlighted thing, which is to do with the passive. So main body and spiritual entity, because obviously Hare has two different forms. You have her Hare form, which is just her as Hare, and then you have her spiritual entity form, which is after she is in her, you press her ultimate and she transforms into this like spear javelin character. But let's slow down for a second and go back to Hare. So when in main body, which is her Hare form or her mage form, I'll probably refer to it as one of those three. But when in the main body form, cast weapon active combined idealism, it summons Seeds of Idea who fight according to Hare's orders. All Seeds of Ideas count as a summoned unit. When Seeds of Idea are present on the field, Hare activates freedom status, receive negative 50% incoming damage. Summon unit exit the field when Hare ults or leave the field. So essentially, when you're starting off as Hare in your mage form, in your Hare form, the casting form, using your weapon active will cast combined idealism and summon Seeds of Idea, which is the core part of this character. And do remember that you do want to have Seeds of Idea on the field at all time if you're playing Hare in this Hare mage mode. That is one thing to really, really remember, is always have your Seeds of Idea on the field. There's many ways to summon them. I believe you can do it through a QTE, which we'll obviously get to in the QTE section, but you can also do it through this method. So always make sure to have that up. And also freedom status, knowing how to trigger that. There's a lot of different ways to trigger freedom status, and it pretty much mostly does the same thing consistently throughout a lot of the kit. I believe in her Hare form, it's negative 50% damage, incoming damage rather, and in her spiritual entity form, it's something completely different, but that's neither here nor there for now. Going down further, again, it's just a bunch of percentage things, nothing too crazy in the stuff that's non-highlighted. It's just dealing damage. There is a bit of a counter mechanic in her Guardian formation, which is kind of interesting, but again, it's just percentage damage, nothing too like finicky and specific and gameplay worthy, but the last part here is during the ultimate, Hare will battle through her spiritual entity. The spiritual entity counts as a summoned unit. A spiritual entity has 4 short spears. After all spears have been thrown, Hare will activate the Freedom State. During Freedom State, she can cast an enhanced basic attack sequence 4 and charge attack. That's kind of just outlining what her spiritual entity is. You press her ultimate and you kind of become a summoned entity, which is just this extra unit that you control that uses spears. You throw them all out and whatnot. And just the last thing to note with the spiritual entity here is the weapon active Remnant Dream. Spiritual entity throws all short spears at once, dealing certain amounts of damage, and activates the Freedom State. So there is another way to do that, and just do remember that that is how you throw all of your short spears, because that is going to be a gameplay mechanic once we get to the gameplay loop section of the video. Knowing how to get your spears back and throw your spears and when to throw your spears, all that kind of stuff is going to be very finicky once you're in your ultimate form. So just remember that your weapon active, once you get into the ultimate form, throws them immediately. So remember that. But going on to the right side, just a bunch of percentages. There is something to note that Dusty Dream increases your crit rate, but mostly we can just go into the summary, which just boosts, you see crit rate boost up to a total of 39%, combined idealism restores SP, and freedom state can be triggered through multiple methods, like summoning Seeds of Idea or Spiritual Entity Weapon active. So yeah, the summary will just kind of outline the most important things here, but this is the passives window done. Moving on to the evasion. Now, the evasion has nothing crazy apart from maybe just one of the passives on the right side, but also the highlighted one on the left side. Evasion can directly link to basic attack sequence 2. Very important, to be quite frank with you. One thing that we'll touch on a bit more later on is that the importance of getting to attack sequence 4 for the ultimate mode. That is very important for this character, I believe at least, and it's the reason that this, this part on the right side here, the triple S unlock, is very powerful as well. So I'll just outline it, but again, obviously it's triple S, and once we get to the rank up section, I'll outline if it's value or not. But when the Spiritual Entity's evasion attack hits an enemy, trigger an evasion skill. Ultimate evasion can be directly linked to basic attack sequence 4 and additionally restores 8 SP. Very powerful, because going to sequence 4 is a very important thing for specific game styles and specific gameplay things, gameplay loops and whatnot. So being able to do that a lot faster is pretty important. But again, it's not too crazy because it's still fast. But regardless, everything else here is just percentage increases. Whenever Hare defeats an enemy, you gain damage bonus. When getting hit in Guardian formation, you cast ultimate refresh evasion skill. It's all just kind of finicky stuff. Again, the summary covers just the most of the important things, which is just percentages. The percentages, by the way, I should say, are pretty fine. Like, specifically, once we get to the actual ultimate, which is just in a second here, the percentages are fine. Outside of the ultimate, the percentages aren't, I would say, anything to write home about. They're just basic percentages. Obviously, because the ultimate mode is the main DPS mode. So just remember that the percentages as of right now aren't too crazy. But going into the basic attack, obviously we have two different sets of sequences. You have one for the mage form and one for the spiritual entity. There's nothing too crazy to remember for this section other than the fact that sequence 4 of mage form requires Seeds of Idea to be on the field for sequence 4 to be cast. If you do not have Seeds of Idea on the field, you cannot cast sequence 4. You just don't have the ability to. You'll just kind of cycle between sequence 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. So make sure to always have your Seeds of Idea on the field. Just so you can get that extra bit of damage, which is 4 times 150, so it's no small amount. As for the Spiritual Entity or Spear Warrior Lady form, sequence 4 is, again, a very important one, and the reason you want to be getting to this sequence as fast as possible is because, obviously, it does a lot more damage. It's 350 plus 650 in terms of percentage, whilst the other ones are just roughly around the 400-ish to below that. So you're immediately getting a lot more damage value, but also you throw all your short spears if you haven't already thrown all your short spears, and then each spear deals 100% attack of physical damage, and it fully charges your spear meter. That is what sequence 4 does in this whole thing. It does a lot of things. Again, it does a lot of damage, throws all the spears, each spear deals damage, and then fully charges your spear meter, which is used to cast some of your charge attacks, which may or may not bring some of your spears back to you, so you can then throw them again. But yeah, sequence 4 is very important for this character. Getting there is very important. Going on to the right side though, we have the QTE. Now the QTE is triggered by a time slow or an impairment. There's a few characters that can do the impairment like willingly, something like I believe the Kiana unit, that's like the Angel or something like that. Divine Prayer, I believe it's called. And then you also have something like Senti, you can trigger impair through those characters, which is very nice. And then also physical supports to a certain degree. And then time slow is obviously very easy to trigger, just dodge something correctly. And then furthermore, dealing 1000% attack of physical damage, summon Seeds of Idea and gain 10 SP. You can do these things through the actual QTE, and that is mostly going to be how you're summoning your Seeds of Idea, to be quite fair, if you're doing the character's gameplay loop correctly in every game mode that isn't Elysian Realm, so that's, Memorial Arena or the Abyss. You're going to be summoning your Seeds of Idea through a QTE rather than using her weapon active to actually summon them. You're going to be using your weapon active more so to just do attacks. But that's just, a bit of a gameplay thing. Into the next one, when Spiritual Entity's spear meter is full, she can directly connect to sequence 4 and deal additional 300% attack of physical damage. Not an extremely important little thing to note down, but because you can connect to sequence 4 a lot faster. But the thing is, it depends on spear meter being full. So if you kind of want to do this weird, DPS kind of rotation of going to sequence 4, doing the damage of sequence 4, but not spending the meter on your actual charge attack. If you want to kind of do something like that, that could work. But again, we'll get to that near the end. And then the last one, on S2, you get initial SP by plus 40, which is quite good, to be quite frank with you. Having more SP is always good for these characters, but it is at S2, so we'll obviously get to that in the rank up section, but I will say now that it's probably not worth it. And again, take a look at the summary if you need a bit of a summarization of that. But we're going to move on to the ultimate, which is going to be the part where we look at a few percentages here. So looking at the ultimate, it has an SP cost of 50, which is quite fine. 50 SP cost ultimate for an ultimate that will give you a lot of value is decent. Hare envelops the entire battlefield into a dreamland and summons a spiritual entity to substitute her in battle, dealing 700% attack of physical damage, and dreamland lasts 20 seconds. So it's a 20-second duration ultimate, quite decent. I don't think it's going to be crazy, but it's also not too short to maybe make it boring. But you do have the option after 5 seconds of entering the warrior mode to press the ultimate button to cast the ultimate finisher. Warrior then throws a spear and ends the dreamland status, switching back to the mage mode and dealing 80% attack of physical damage, which is quite a lot of percentage, to be fair with you. I think, now don't quote me on the exact percentages, I think that's the highest percentage as well, or roughly around the same percentage as something like Hersher of Finality with the trio team. And so for this one character to be able to do that is very, very impressive. And then during finisher cast, Hare is invincible and the finisher cast timer stops, so it's very good. And the percentages there are all fine and dandy, but once we get to the right side here, we have a lot more percentages to take into consideration. And I'm going to talk about a bit more of a situational thing, which is the old dream, which is a toggleable thing, which may give you a bit of a massive bonus, but you may not want to toggle it on depending on your situation in terms of your build. So if we take a look at it, ultimate activation consumes additional SP to a maximum of 50 additional XP, to a total cost of, if you consume an extra 50, 100 SP cost ultimate. But you do get bonuses for doing this. So you increase Hare's physical damage by additional SP consumed times 0.7, and then crit rate by additional SP consumed by times 0.5, which for the physical damage, you can get a total of 35% physical damage bonus increase there, with crit rate increased by 25%, which is obviously very, very optimal. Being able to get those two buffs is very, very crucial. But the reason you're probably going to want to toggle this on is because there's no harm in the damage bonus, right? There's absolutely no harm. If you get, let's say only 10 extra SP consumed, you're going to get some sort of damage bonus. If you, 13, some amount of extra damage bonus. So there's no harm in doing it. But the only reason you may not want to equip it is if you're really, really struggling with SP issues. If you have absolutely no way to build up excess amount of SP, that's probably going to be one of the only reasons that you're maybe not going to want to run this, because you may want to have enough SP to do another cast of the actual ultimate. That's probably about the only reason. Other than that, if you can manage to have enough SP through some sort of support Valkyrie like Part of Fellas regenning your SP, or if you have any Stigma signature to her, or any Stigma that actually just has any SP regen, I would highly recommend running this, as you can get a very decent amount of buffing from it. But going on to the next one, Birth and Death, which is the next important one. Your ultimate finisher, specifically the thing that will take you out from your ultimate mode back into Hare mode, and also deals this 1,680% damage rather. That thing has 100% crit rate and 30% increased crit damage, which is overall very, very powerful. And nothing else should be said there. It's just you deal an incredibly large amount of damage. But then beginning and the end of a dream, it's a double S unlock. Ultimate finisher gains another additional 350% multiplier of physical damage, taking it from 1800 to 2150. Again, I included that because I saw it in Marissa's video, but I didn't really understand it. I just saw it as I know that it's a percentage increase, but I feel like that didn't need to be included. But it doesn't really matter. This is a pretty good ultimate, I'll be honest with you. She's an ultimate based character. Hare, as we can tell, her main damage mode comes from her Hare mode, which is, rather not her Hare mode. Hare's main damage comes from her ultimate mode, which is very powerful, and I think the gameplay loop also does pay off in terms of being fun, but we'll get to that in a second. I just did notice here that I wrote down Old Dream is very powerful, should be always toggled on, and guaranteed crit on ultimate, good stuff, which it is good stuff. But going on to the charge attack, and this is where we get to mention the spear stuff again, and throwing your spears and retrieving your spears. So we have the normal charge attack, because you have two different versions of this. So you have her, this little flavor text at the top. This can be only casted when controlling the spiritual entity. You do not have a charge attack whilst you're in Hare mode, the mage mode. You do not have a charge attack there, so you will not be holding the attack button during that mode. Just bear that in mind. The only time you have this is when you're in your spear mode, your ultimate mode, your spiritual entity mode. And so you have two different variants. Hold attack button without any spear meter, and the spiritual entity dashes back and will begin to throw her short spears. Continuously press attack button to throw all the spears in a sequence. Every throw deals 130% attack of physical damage. During this time, Hare gains Iron Body status. This is a very interesting one. We now have, I think, about 3 different ways to throw spears. Now, you may be wondering, again, how do you collect these spears? How do you gain them back? If I've thrown them, when do they come back to me? Well, that's where the next part comes in, Chibaku Tensei. And if you're a Naruto fan, you know what that means. It essentially means pull to me. But at max meter, which is the spear meter, hold attack button to cast. A spiritual entity gathers and traps nearby enemies in stone and then tosses out a long spear to shatter it, dealing 4 times 130 plus 1080% attack of physical and retrieving all short spears. This is the only way to retrieve your short spears, and this is why attack sequence 4 is a very crucial part of the character, as that is the only way. Through just reading, again, I've got no hands-on gameplay personally, but through just reading and through just understanding text, the only way to actually retrieve your spears is through attack sequence 4, because that's the only way to get a maximum spear meter. So bear that in mind. There is a lot of gameplay loops that you can probably theorize about throwing spears, going to attack sequence 4, getting them back, throwing them through a different method to maybe spice up the gameplay, so on and so forth. But for now, that is the only way to retrieve spears. And yeah, Chibaku Tensei's Planetary Devastation, I believe, from Naruto, which is obviously amazing. On the right side, we just have a bunch of percentages that are small increases, nothing too crazy to write home about. And yeah, just the interesting thing to note out of how to get the spears is just through Chibaku Tensei. Moving on though to the actual rank up tree. Now I'm not going to read them all. If you do want to read them all, by all means pause the video and take a little bit of a squiz at the percentages. I'm going to go over the ones that I'd recommend and kind of elaborate why I'd recommend them. They're highlighted in yellow. The ones that I'd say are actually decent to get. And let me elaborate on all of them. So on S3, you actually get your lead skill level up from 22% crit damage and 8% physical to 24 crit damage and 9% physical, which is quite powerful, to be quite frank with you. You gain 2% extra crit damage, and technically you gain an extra 2% physical if you're rocking, I think, 2 physical characters alongside her. 3 if it counts Hare. I don't know if it counts Hare, but technically gain 2 to 3 extra physical. So it is quite decent to get this one. This is not her best one, but it's like the earliest recommendation I can make is her lead skill, and you'll most likely be running her as the leader. But the actual first recommendation that I can wholeheartedly recommend is Double S, which is an unlock. Now, there is an unlock at S2, but I just don't think the 40 SP is overly worth it, as SP in, Honkai, all it does is really increase your tempo. It makes you be able to, confirm, do a lot of your rotations, and maybe prolong the amount of time that you'll be able to have your damage window up because you're lining up all your cooldowns. But that's not enough of a reason for me to say to invest in it. Obviously, if you're looking for tempo, go for it, but it's not enough for me to recommend. Double S is what I'd recommend, which is essentially an unlock. Ultimate finisher gains an additional multiplier by 350 of physical damage, makes your ultimate finisher in your ultimate mode deal a much more damage. It deals a lot more damage, and I'd recommend this one over a lot of the other ones. Other than that, she doesn't gain a lot more value, like, in between. I think, if you combined Double S1, Double S2, and Double S3, and kind of looked at Double S3 as all of them as one package, it would be really worth it there, because you get the lead skill level up, you get a bunch of percentage increase. But other than that, nothing really here does anything else. The only other part that I think is really useful is Triple S, which is an unlock, and it was the previous thing that we mentioned with getting to attack sequence 4 faster as your evasion attack hits enemies, trigger the skill ultimate evasion can be directly linked to the basic attack sequence 4, and additionally restore 8 SP, which is great. I think that's like a really good thing, but again, it's triple S, so it's hard to recommend, but it's one of the last milestones. And that's kind of my stance on this. It's kind of like, okay rank ups. I think the character will be just fine at S0. I don't think this character will be overly highly invested unless you obviously are looking to stay in the meta, which who the hell tries to stay in the meta these days? That shit's boring as fuck. Even though I've never been in the meta, who the fuck cares? Anyway, moving on. Now we're going to go on to her actual gears, which is she has 2 weapons. Only 2 weapons. She has her signature and the foundry. Now, I'm going to keep this part very short and very simple. If you roll for her weapon and you get it, that's going to be her best in slot forever. If you don't roll on a weapon, the foundry weapon is going to be literally the next best thing. You've got no other options. They are introducing a new weapon type with the character, which is spears, and so you don't have many options because it's a brand new thing. Much like when chakrams were released, much like when certain things were released, like whatever the hell was released before, you don't have many options. So if you go for her weapon and you get it, congrats. If you don't go for her weapon and you don't get it, go for the foundry one. That's all you got. So GG's. Now the actual things, and is one is better than the other. Obviously in terms of a percentage, Hare's signature, Conscious Thoughts, Lucid Dreams is a lot better than the foundry one. But in terms of a gameplay standpoint, nothing too crazy. Really, you only get an extra bit of SP. There's nothing like Hare of Finality and Hare of Origin, where they are hindered by not having their signature weapons in terms of a gameplay fluidity standpoint. In this example, all you really do is by having Hare's weapon is gain a lot more % damage, and also gain a bit more SP to maybe increase your tempo in certain fights. That's about it. You don't get any other bonuses. So just bear that in mind. If you really care about damage and, tempo slightly, her weapon is going to be probably a must-have for you. If you don't care about that too much, the Foundry Sphere will be just fine. Moving on to her signature stigma. I want to cover all of her signature things before we get into the alternate builds that I might recommend, or, if you have it available to you. We're going to get into her signature stuff, which is Alexandra Stigma version 3. I don't have the images, but they're very nice images of Alexandra, Bronya's mother, because obviously they're connected through the story. And essentially, I'm going to summarize this all again, is that it's like every character nowadays. You're going to need bottom, as it applies the Dream Sync effect, and then, her middle piece, is dependent on Dream Sync. And so you're going to need the bottom piece as it applies this effect when you hit enemies. But overall, everything here is just host damage or crit damage or summoned units damage. That's all it really is here. You have the top, which is 20% physical when you summon units on the field, more physical. Middle is total damage plus 30, host crit damage 20 against enemies affected by Dream Sync. On hit, inflict Dream Sync on the bottom now. More damage or in Dream Sync, so on and so forth. Is just those type of damage modifiers. So this is going to be her best in slot because Honkai's, design philosophy and build philosophy has kind of divulged into just you get the best in slot stuff, and that's not really bad. But the reason I'm simplifying this part is because it doesn't really matter in the long run, as you have a lot of choices. Now, if you're a long-term player, you may look at this like, oh, these are pretty shit choices. I chose these choices for one reason and one reason alone, is that the character doesn't really matter. For example, I'll use Alicia G4 here as the example. The only reason G4 Alicia is extremely good on physical Alicia is because the 3 set is ranged damage. Other than that, Alicia is really good on every character. G4 Alicia is good on every character. Hare is kind of the same case. Her signature, which is Alexandra, is really good on her because in the 2 set and the 3 set, you have some Hare equip bonuses, so specific for her, and then you have some host summon unit damage. But everything else is just crit damage or physical damage. So you're not going for any very, very specific stat. It's not like bleed or, airborne or, 3-legged, 7-eyed. It's no weird affix like that. You just have crit damage, physical damage, enemy damage taken, and then very minutely you have host summoned units, right? So you can pretty much chuck anything on her. Really, you can just chuck anything on her. These are, some, mediocre examples. I didn't want to use anything too extravagant, but G4 Alicia is a pretty good one. You could chuck that on. It wouldn't be bad. You also Dirac, which is a very generic building one. Dante, Columbus, Alan Poe, they're not terrible ones. But then obviously signature is obviously going to be the best. But yeah, I don't think there's any bad choice. You can mix and match a few of these if you don't have a specific set. But G4 and G3 physical sets, which is Dirac and Alicia, they're not too hard to obtain, specifically Dirac as she is G3. So bear that in mind, the build difficulty is not too crazy. Now going on to her support characters, I kind of separated this into like 3 different sections. These are all the ones that I can remember and find myself through my own investigations and knowledge searching of characters that are good for supporting physical characters. On the left side, we have the Shield Breakers, and we have Mrs. Caroline Pepperoni, as well as Prometheus. Now, Prometheus, I haven't covered yet. She'll be coming out after this video, and so stay tuned for her if you want to figure out how she works and, go on a bit of a study session with me to find out how she works. But they're both shield breakers, and if you're going for a shield breaker situation, you may want to run these. In the middle, we have the impair/physical boosters, which they either, do one of those 2 things. They boost physical damage through some sort of method, or they impair the enemy, which is reducing their defense through some sort of method. And then on the right side, we have the bleed dependency/Partafellis. This is kind of a bit more of a niche. The right side is the niche characters that you wouldn't run necessarily 100% guaranteed, but if you had them and they were built, you may run them. Partafellis is there because Partafellis' ultimate is very powerful. After watching, I think, a video or 2 about the character, and also reading a few of the character's things, Partafellis' ultimate is very, very powerful. A lot of SP regeneration, enemy damage taken, very good. So she's there just because she can do the job decently, and Griseo is there because, well, she's just a physical support, but because of the niche bleedness, you may not want to run her, may want to run her. Maybe you don't have her stigma, so without stigma, she's kind of useless. And so it's kind of dependent there, but a few of these other characters, they do their job even without having their gears. But going on to the characters that I recommend, Hare of Sentience is kind of like a no-brainer. Hare of Sentience has always been powerful, and I don't think she'll never not be powerful here. The impair stuff, everything that she does, generally speaking, is very, very useful. Physical boosting, impairment, but the other 2 are not bad. Divine Prayer is going to be on the weaker side, as she's a very old character. And then after that, you're going to have Kong Ming, or rather Starlight Astrologos. She's good, she's fine. Physical boosting, I believe a bit of crit rate boosting as well, so it's going to help along with Hare's crit rate. And on the left side, again, situational ones, but a bit better still. I think, I'm going to presume, I have not looked at Prometheus personally right now as of the making and recording of this video, but I assume Prometheus is going to be like a shield breaker physical support instead of just a shield breaker, but both of these will work. Go for like a Senti and Shield Breaker build, or Senti and Griseo, or Senti Partafellis. Any combination. I would just recommend having an Impair character. That's about it. Go for someone in the middle, and then anyone on the outside, and that'll be just fine. But really, you can't go wrong with this as long as you have any of these characters on the team with some modicum amount of investment. Now, going on to the final part here, the pseudo gameplay flow. It's kind of hard to really theory craft gameplay flow when you can't have hands-on gameplay with the characters, because I just can't really, but there's a few things that I can theorize and put together very simply, and it's going to be, this is all one sequence, but I split it into different forms here. You have main body form, which is during Hare mode, and then you have spiritual entity form, which is obviously during the ultimate form. And starting off with the main body form, you want to summon your Seeds of Ideas with your QTE, which will also restore you a bit of SP. I think this is going to be universally how you always summon your Seeds of Idea, is through the QTE. Now, obviously, if you're in Elysian Realm, you're not going to be able to do that. Elysian Realm is a completely different argument. I don't want to pull that in. I didn't want to mention it, though, that it doesn't really work there. We're mainly looking at Abyss and Memorial Arena. So you're going to mainly summon your summon Seeds of Idea with your QTE. It's going to give you a bit of SP. Then you just got to go through your attack sequence 1 to 4, which is only, again, triggerable when you have the Seeds of Idea present. This is going to get you just a bit of damage going and a bit of SP and a bit of things going. If you have a weapon active glow at some point, press it. When it glows, this is going to trigger your Seeds of Idea to do their specific attacks at certain intervals, because they have different attacks when, obviously, they do certain things. But you'll want to get into your ultimate mode as soon as possible. Maybe you want to skip, sequence, rather step 2 and 3 if you want to get into ultimate mode as fast as possible. Specifically, if you're doing something like the last stage of Memorial Arena or the last stage of Abyss. Probably just press your ultimate as soon as possible, because that is where your main damage comes in. And that's where we go on to the next step, which is in the spiritual entity form. Which is then, I think as soon as you enter spiritual entity form, you're going to want to, press your weapon active to gain the freedom status and throw all of your short spears. You want to get rid of all your short spears as quickly as possible, in my opinion. Get the damage out and going. throw all your short spears with the weapon active, gain freedom status, and enhance attack sequence, which is going to be very good. Then you're going to want to attack sequence from 1 all the way to 4 and get a full spear meter. Then you're going to want to retrieve all those spears because you've just thrown them out, which you're going to hold attack to trigger your Chibaku Tensei, which is going to retrieve all your spears back to you. And then I believe, personally, you're going to add a little bit of an attack hold here to go into throwing mode, which you're then going to spam attack and throw all of your short spears again. And then as soon as that animation is finished, to exit your damage phase because you don't want to spend too much time in your ultimate mode because you may have some damage drop off. You're going to press your ultimate, cast the ultimate finisher, and deal mega damage. And that's kind of the whole combo, which is repeatable, I believe. Then you're going to switch to your supports again, do all their support thingies, get all your buffs back up. Hopefully you have SP regeneration through some sort of method. Get all the buffs back up. QTE back in with Hare, get your Seeds of Idea, and go through the whole motions again. This, to me, seems like a pretty confident level of, power that you can do, or confident sequence that you can do. Is it going to be the to the T, Nirvana level gameplay? Absolutely not. That's not what I do. I'm not that kind of guy. Honestly, I don't have the brain power or the brain capacity to do that. But if you're looking for pretty solid damage and pretty solid rotation, I would say this is a, pretty good one. This is very good. I'm actually going to say this is the best. This is the best combo that you guys could ever do. So follow this combo to the T, even if it doesn't quite work. Now, to wrap up this already lengthy video, here are my final thoughts. The character is good. Hare is a good character, most likely the next best physical DPS. I don't want to say confirmed the next best physical DPS, but may be the next best, just because she's new, right? The new character is usually one of the stronger, but obviously a lot of the game is dependent on type countering, so each character will still be, in their respective place. But one thing I can say for certain is that I do 100% believe that she'll replace BKE as the best mech physical character. Obviously, they share the same role. I think Hare will become the next best one because they share the same role and the new one is usually better. So, unfortunate to the BKE users, but this will happen. Now, will BKE still be useful? Yes. You can 100% still use BKE as like a fine unit. She's still very powerful, but I think Hare will be a fair bit more powerful. Other than that, Hare's got some cool visuals. She summons the squad. The squad rocks up, deals some damage. I love the visuals a lot. She also has a new weapon type, which is the spear. That also means that she's very easy to build, as you only have 2 options, and the second option is not too far behind. New damage type in Abyss, Memorial Arena, and Elysian Realm, which is going to be the summoned units. This is a speculation. I have got no evidence to support this, but I have heard through some sort of wind, wind bending, air bending, that there's going to be a new affix per se, the summoned units affix, where it's going to be like summoned units deal more damage, which is fine to me. That's obviously fine. Introducing more stuff means more variety and more kind of diversity, so I'm okay with that. But to be quite fair, my final note here is something that resonates deeply with me, is that it's nothing crazy in terms of gameplay or play style. It's all just visuals. Everything that you do with the character, anything that looks interesting is just looks. Gameplay wise, it's still just the same gameplay. You're just attacking, you're just pressing your ultimate, you're just pressing your, holding your charge attack. It's nothing crazy. We had Susanna release where she had this rhythm game mode, when that was really cool, although kind of like at a certain point got very, very monotonous because it's the same song, no different songs really. It would have been cool if you could have different songs, but regardless, you had that cool gameplay, and then you're going back to this kind of character that's just generic attack Andy, although visuals are incredible in my opinion, just a generic attack Andy. But yeah, that's pretty much the whole final thought section. I think she'll be a great character, but if you're not too invested in being in the meta, I don't think she's overly cool looking to really warrant going for her. Because or rather gameplay wise, there's nothing crazy going on there. It's all just visuals, but even then the visuals are very, very just kind of subjective, obviously. So if you're into the visuals, go for it. If you're not into the visuals, don't go for it. Yeah, that's pretty much it. And this has been the Hare analysis. This was a different format for those who have watched the previous analyses for the previous characters. This has been a different format. We're doing slideshow Andy maneuvers over here. And we're probably going to continue doing the format like this. It's a very much easier one to follow for me, as well as I feel it's going to be a lot easier for you guys to follow. So if the format does stick, That's great. If it doesn't, well, I'll see what else I can do. But hope you guys did enjoy. And again, if there's anything that I missed or anything that I may have gotten inaccurate, anything that changes in future versions, by all means, comment it down below in the comment section. I'll try to respond and try to address it. But regardless, if you guys did enjoy and if it was helpful, like the video and subscribe to the channel. Have a great day, and I'll see you guys in the Prometheus analysis.